Hello everyone, welcome back to Aurelia City in City Skylines. Today we will return to the river in this new part of the city. We did some landscaping around the airport, we finished the residential areas in front of it, and then did some more open residential areas right in the center of this entire district. Directly below that place, towards the river, is the area that we will focus on today. We will finish the highway exit roundabout that we had here for quite a long time, and then we will build the main project of today's episode, which is going to be the Waterfront Plaza with lots of details, multiple levels, and a light rail stop. We will also expand the high-density blocks all around, so quite a lot of things to do. Let's go. Let's jump right into building some of these waterfront areas. So I experimented with quite a lot of structures for this place, different combinations of buildings, and I finally chose this roundabout building. I'm pretty sure that it was used in the city in some different places. I think like 3 episodes back we used similar looking buildings, residential variants I think. This is the office variant, I'm not exactly sure. Doesn't really matter, but in here I decided to use it as procedural objects because this building comes in like a complex of 2 buildings, inner and outer. I decided with the procedural objects to just get rid of the smaller inner building and only keep this larger one. Then I scaled it up so that it's larger, which is going to allow me to have like a larger area in front of it, which is going to be some sort of a plaza. The plaza is also going to have the light rail going on the side of it, kind of. So we need to alter the original shape or default shape of this light rail that I prepared here some time ago. It was going parallel to that main avenue, but in here it's just going to turn towards the plaza and through these blocks later. I'm copying another one of these curved buildings in here, which is basically going to form the shape also of the light rail somewhat. In here I built a new road. I was not showing this at all. I'm really sorry about that, but this episode was getting already quite long, and this avenue I have not showed you how it's exactly built and where it's going. And there's also a tunnel entrance, as you can see here. It's basically going underneath the like a ridge, like a more natural ridge that's going to originate from that medium density residential area that we built last time. And it's going to go closer towards the opposite end of the residential bridge, if you remember that project. The residential bridge is going to be part of the next Aurelia episode, so I promise you that I'm going to make all of these places kind of clearer how they function together, and it's going to be more apparent. I also did some kind of highway infrastructure around the residential bridge, but like I said, it was not really relevant to today's episode, so I decided to completely cut it away from the time-lapse for today. But let's return to this plaza and what exactly is going on here. So this is kind of a standard procedure really for making these multi-level plazas. I was doing that for the previous light rail stop, if you remember, with that high density expansion video, I think it was. So this is just the border of the second level, and later I'm obviously going to fill those places within the borders with some surfaces. But before I did that, I decided to do some expansion of these places because I kind of wanted to have a better idea how this place is going to look like so that the plaza can be, slightly altered to that. So I did that corner building, which is actually made of 3 different structures, or pretty much the same looking structures but with different heights. By the way, I really like these kinds of buildings that come with different height configurations because you can really play a lot with the shapes of the final buildings if you clip them together and stuff like that. So that was just a tiny little explanation why I'm really using these buildings quite a lot. Anyway, I decided to do some sort of like a wall of the first level that's going to copy the shape of the second level, and I wanted to do it with some like shop windows or something like that. So I picked this commercial structure, which again I think was used in Aurelia before, but in here with procedural objects I basically just took the front window, and that's pretty much it. And then I copied it all along this, well, not really all along this outline, but in some places basically originating, kind of copying the shape in here along the road, kind of originating from the wall of that curved building, and then it's just going to copy this outline all the way to those light rail tracks. Need to make sure that they are not clipping through the upper surface and that they are nicely fitting the surface of the first level beneath that. So Now we are moving to the opposite end. In here I did some kind of a like a restaurant building, I'm thinking. Maybe it's going to be like an observation area of the river or something, but it's most probably going to be some kind of a smaller restaurant. And it's also going to act as an access point between the first and the second level. And as you could have seen, I did the procedural objects, gravel surfaces. I used the circle in there to just make it nicely fit. In this place, I really wanted to finally I wanted to do this kind of a expansion of the high density places around this area, because like I mentioned before, that's going to kind of make it clearer how this entire plaza needs to be. Whether I'm going to do like super high density blocks near it, or I'm going to do some medium density residential, something like that. I eventually chose this very high density feel around the curved buildings. I have to admit that it could have probably been done better, because eventually all the clipping into the curved buildings is kind of defeating the shape of those curved buildings. Maybe they should have been actually like freestanding, but it's just a different idea, a really different concept. So this place could have been done in a million different ways. I chose this one, so it's fine. In the end, it's going to be fine. There are some terrain differences or elevation differences between some of these levels. For example, this road that's inside of these blocks is slightly higher than the second level of the plaza. So in here, I just already decided to do some of this like final detailing, because I'm not really going to detail that place too much. It's just a connection between some of the roads, so it doesn't really matter. This is pretty much what I was talking about. This little observation area is going to serve us also the support of that portion of the second level, kind of like a physical support, and it's also going to act as a connection, pedestrian connection, where people can actually enter it from the first level and go to the second one. That was just a tiny little detail that I did, but I'm going to continue with building these high density blocks all around it. And I'm definitely not showing everything in the time lapse in here, because I really wanted to cut it as short as possible. I'm just showing some of the high-rise buildings that I'm placing in here, doing some of the infrastructure, and kind of positioning the buildings to make them nicely fit. You can also see that in here I slightly changed the shape of the light railway, and it's also going to that main avenue, back into the main avenue at a slightly different angle. I definitely played a lot with the node controller in here, and later I'm actually going to it's going to be like part of today's build, but I'm going to do the intersection marking tool detailing with that connection for the railway. But I'm not going to show you in today's time lapse, because again, it was not exactly super relevant to the Plaza project, so I decided to keep it for some different videos. But it's going to be visible there in the cinematics. But don't worry, I'm most probably going to show you that in some next videos. Probably not the next one, but after the next one, then maybe we are going to return to that area. But enough of that. Let's focus more on the stuff that we are actually focusing on today. So in here, I did some kind of a pedestrian road that's copying the shape of the railway. And there are some residential buildings that are going to be connected to this place. And it's kind of looking kind of nice, because the light railway is slightly below this pedestrian road. It's obviously ascending, so it's eventually going to come to the same level, as you can see right here. But there are some residential buildings that are right parallel to the pedestrian road, and it's kind of clipping into the pedestrian road slightly, so that it's going to it's actually going to go past the railing, because I'm obviously using the elevated version there, and people are going to go into those buildings from the elevated part of this pedestrian road. So that's kind of nice. It's going to be kind of lively, and it's just forming that high density feel. So that's kind of nice. Closer to the river, I definitely wanted to have some shorter buildings, because I wanted to have those taller buildings behind them, visible from the river, so that people living in these houses have a clear view of the river. So right by the river, I have some very short buildings. And there was a gap between those and the railway. I decided to finally fill it with some of these office procedural object buildings. And it was obviously a slightly weird shape there. So eventually I did it with like highly distorted office buildings with procedural objects. You could have seen me actually rotate even some of the walls there, but I think it actually fits quite nicely. This building in here is a real-life building from Paris, I think. I really wanted to place that building in a lot of different places already in the city, but eventually I chose this area. Yeah, I'm not really going to focus on that building because that building is unfortunately kind of placed between different project areas, so it's actually going to be somewhat neglected in some of these episodes, but eventually I'm going to return to it and gradually finish it. So don't worry, that building is going to see some more action as we progress with Aurelia. But now we need to return back to the waterfront, and this is actually something that I did not originally plan, but it was kind of a nice idea to do something like this. So you could have seen me make like a third level, like a sunken level below this plaza level, and I also did the water source. So it's kind of obvious what this place is going to be, right? This is going to be basically another river that's going to go into the main one. This one is going to be very, very small. It's obviously kind of thin compared to the main river of Aurelia. So it's going to be actually a part or the end of like another landscaping project that I actually finished, quite recently. Like I mentioned in previous episodes, I am building Aurelia these days quite well in advance. So I already have I don't know how many episodes in advance when I'm making this commentary. So I'm already incorporating this tiny river into some landscaping projects further away from this area. But we will all see that in some coming episodes. Anyway, in here I did some detailing on the edges in here. I kind of at first wanted to just make some of those walls go together and force some nice corners, but eventually it was clearer that it's just going to be much easier to just hide those edges with some rocks, and it's kind of going to create some natural looking detailing in there. Later I'm obviously going to put some willow trees and some kind of reeds and stuff all around those rocks, so it's really going to look like some natural area in this high density building blocks. It's obviously going to look very artificial. That's kind of obvious, but it's just going to be a nice breakage of those high density blocks that we have all around this place. So doing something different every once in a while is always welcome. This is something that I'm actually going to fiddle with quite a lot. I definitely won't. I was not sure about this shape of this entire confluence of the rivers in here. So later I'm actually going to delete this another viewing building in there, because I'm going to just do the shapes slightly differently. I had to put a lot of these decals in here for the first level of the plaza. I definitely didn't want to have it just as pavement. So obviously these tiled decals are very necessary to put in here, but thanks to the procedural objects and obviously the functionality of the procedural objects that you can just align it to the surface, it was pretty much just a simple process, really. Something that we have done in that first episode, I think, when we came into this part of the city. We also did some waterfront plazas, so that's pretty much the same process. I was not sure how to do this light rail stop at first. I wanted to have some different tracks maybe, but eventually I did this pretty much vanilla track in here with just the improved looking rails. But otherwise it's just a normal looking track. I'm doing the kind of detailing that I'm always doing with these light rail tracks or stations or stops. So doing those kinds of concrete like crossing places. Later I'm obviously going to put all kinds of paths through the area so that people can actually walk over, and doing this asphalt network in here to actually hide the edges of the tiles. That's why I also did the planters in there. But even if I didn't need to hide the tiles, I would probably put it there anyway, because it's just a nice detail. It kind of blocks the area away from the light rail so that it's going to be slightly safer, let's say, but that's not really important in this detailing process anyway. I decided to change the shape of this railing above the river in here, the small river, and I just make it slightly smaller and different shaped, because this entire place was kind of organic shaped, the outline of the second level, so it only made sense that the railing above the river is also going to be somewhat non-uniform, right? It was kind of difficult to then put these decals to kind of repair this place, and I also noticed that there is a bit of a problem with these decals, because they nicely fit the surface, but the problem is that there is a network around, the border is a network, right? The railing is obviously a network, which means that it's going to have decals displayed on it, which is not really that big of a deal on the same level, on the surface level where the first level is, but it's actually going to show below the borders, and it's also going to show on the keys that I placed as the border of the river. So I had to fiddle a lot with procedural objects, and later I think I am going to show it in here. I also did some of those like hanging vines on the edges of the borders, just so I can hide the ugly looking decals showing through. You could have seen that I also, like I mentioned before, I repaired that one corner of the river, and I just did the rocks on both corners there where the rivers meet. This is something very important that I should have done right from the start, but better late than never, I guess, with this kind of detailing. So, like I mentioned many times before, I definitely want to do these new places where the trams and buses and all the kinds of first-person worthy transportation goes. I definitely need to make sure that it's actually going to look good from that first-person view. So all these ploppable surfaces, the gravel on the second level, it doesn't have a texture from the bottom. It's just a see-through. So if I was doing like a first-person light rail ride through this area, then it would just show the ceiling. Or sorry, it would show the skybox, right? The sky, clouds and all. So I definitely needed to make sure that there is some kind of a ceiling in that area. So I was using the same like a concrete box that I was using in that public transport hub area, even in that transfer station some time ago. So it was kind of like a tried and true method of doing this kind of detailing. In here it was obviously a bit more difficult because the upper level is slightly organically shaped, so I had to use some procedural objects and shape it accordingly. And I was not really doing it everywhere, because I was actually looking at the first person view from the light rail car, and just looking exactly where I need to do it so that it's not going to be visible, right? So for example, this larger teardrop in here of the second level does not have the ceiling because it's not visible from the first person ride. So it's just going to save some time. Definitely need to break the shape, or definitely need to break the first layer, I guess, from this plaza, because it's kind of big and it's kind of monotone with just the white color. And same can be said for the second level as well. So definitely need to add something green in here, some kind of planters, and just like I decided to change the shape of the railing over the river, I needed to make these planters organically shaped as well. So that's exactly what I'm doing in here. I'm trying to only have planters with 3 nodes, which means that it's going to be some kind of distorted triangles with one line always kind of heavily curved or something. So, it's just going to be one style and it's going to be looking nice. Also need to make sure that this place is kind of believable when it comes to like, physics, so that it's not just hanging in the air. And yeah, this is, by the way, the detailing that I was talking about. You can see that those decals are kind of showing through on the lower parts of those railings. And finally, this is probably the most satisfying part in all of these projects, because you can do these kinds of projects technically right and do all those kinds of supports and the structures, but eventually it's going to look much better when you start doing this green detailing. Because if I was not doing this, then the place would just look kind of terrible, actually. But this is just the difference, between a terrible looking place and actually a pretty cool looking project, right? So doing even some benches and the street lights, but most important are definitely the detailings in the planters with all the trees and flowers and stuff like that. Kind of tried to do different color in here to bring as many colors as I can. So I try to do different flowers, red flowers, white, but I already have white color on the first level, so I didn't really want to put it on the first level too much, but on the second level it's kind of a nice contrast, and definitely these yellow looking trees. So eventually it's looking rather okay. I also had to make sure that this place is useful for people, and they are going to be walking all around it, and obviously to connect the light rail stop with some entrances, because right now it's not connected to the outside world at all. This place is going to have a lot of possible connections, and this light rail stop is going to be very busy, which is pretty much the same story with all the rest of the light rail stop that we have done in the previous episodes. It's even going to connect to this pedestrian road. By the way, on the end of the pedestrian road, there is a zonable, invisible road. That's why there is that flashing symbol with the unconnected road, because I think it's one way, which doesn't really matter because I'm using it only for pedestrians. But the point is that it's going to delete that end node of that pedestrian road, which would otherwise have the railing all around it. But I obviously needed to connect to a pedestrian path like this and to the stairs. So this works perfectly fine. I was kind of surprised that it actually works, but it does. So that's kind of cool. And also everywhere the paths go into the buildings in here, I decided to put this procedural object door, which is kind of scaled up, I think, so that it perfectly fits the width of the pedestrian path, even though the invisible path that I'm using to just convert the visible one is slightly narrower, so it wouldn't be that big of a deal. There are even stairs that go towards that roundabout, which I'm actually going to focus on right now. So this entire place is basically like a big intersection for pedestrians, really. It's going to allow people to just traverse this entire area, not exactly on the main streets. They can just take some of these dedicated pedestrian routes. So this was something that I really needed to do, actually, because I was not sure at all what I'm going to do with the inside of this roundabout exit. Did I actually do the detailing in previous episodes? I think I might have done that, yeah. But today we are finally going to finish the place inside of the roundabout, which is kind of critical. We did the buildings around it, so that kind of enclosed it nicely. But in here I decided, why not actually extend the river and make it visible through the place inside the roundabout? Because, why not? It's kind of going to nicely fill it, and it's not really going to be that difficult at all. It's definitely going to be, better kind of detailing project compared to some just, slapping some trees or flowers inside the roundabout, which I'm doing all the time. So, doing some kind of a change is always welcome. Need to make sure that all these places around these buildings are going to be nicely covered, because I had to do a lot of terraforming networks under this place so that the water is actually going to flow through. I had to put another source of water in there to kind of make it flow in the right direction. This kind of detailing inside I also did with the walls. With these are like keys that do not bring one side of the terrain up, and I also put some asphalt down below to kind of form a nice surface under the water level. Around here I just did some kind of this is like a noise wall, highway noise blocking wall or something like that. Doesn't really matter. The point is that it's a wall that's kind of short. It doesn't go all the way down to the river, and it's just going to form like an edge that's going to show some inconsistencies with the detailing. And in here, as you can see, there are some of those shadows, the terrain shadows, and just the ruined terrain and some of the cliff terrain showing through. I really didn't want to just cover that with maybe procedural object grass or something. So eventually I decided to cover that with flowers, because that works perfectly fine. It's not going to be accessible by people, the inside of the roundabout anyway. There are no crosswalks into the middle of it, so it's going to be fine to do it like this, to just get rid of the sidewalks with surface painter, and then just do the detailing like that. And doing some more planters in some of these larger areas around the roundabout as well, putting some trees there, but otherwise it's completely done. So as always, here are the before and after shots. You can see the residential bridge in the corner right there, and you can see that I did some changes to the infrastructure on the side of it, but I'm going to show you that in the next episode. Today we built a huge chunk of the waterfront. We did some nice project related to the river, so it's not just the wall that's going along the river. We also switched the walls because from those areas that we did, I had this retaining wall on the left in here, and on the right I had continued this place with the Sydney Quay or something, I'm not sure what it's called exactly, which is going to end underneath the residential bridge, where we are just going to do like a more natural looking waterfront, which is kind of going to emphasize the fact that we are just moving away from the city center. In here we have lots of residential buildings. They're all nicely connected through this place, so even people living in these houses by the light rail can easily just go on these pedestrian paths towards the light rail stop, towards the plaza, do some shopping in those buildings. So it's all nicely coming together. This is like a detailed shot of the plaza. I'm really satisfied with how the water is just flowing through, and a decal underneath the wooden bridge is nicely showing. So it's a really nice looking project. I really do like this place. There are some of those reeds that I was talking about right next to the rocks, kind of between the rocks and stuff. By the way, these rocks are kind of recently downloaded by me, but I've used them in some different projects that I'm going to show you in some coming weeks. So definitely stay tuned for that. Those are the supports underneath that second level, which is kind of making this place more believable that it would actually be able to stand there. This is the roundabout. It's kind of looking like an eye in here with the water just flowing through. The glass is obviously covering it so that people don't fall through or something. If there's like a car accident maybe. But otherwise I'm really satisfied with this entire area because it's kind of fitting this high density feel, but on the other hand it's like a more open project, so it's nicely combining these two styles, and it's definitely following the same kind of style as on the opposite side of the river, which is very important because the city kind of needs that. Anyway guys, that is all for today's episode. Thank you for watching it. I hope you liked it. If you did, then you can put a thumbs up underneath it. You can share the video with your friends. You can subscribe to the channel if you're new here. And if you want to directly support the channel, support me, you can become a channel member with the join button below. Thanks again for watching. Take care and goodbye.